Welcome, everyone, to today's Explainer. I am so incredibly thrilled to have you here as we unpack a truly fascinating piece of research. Today, we're actually going to look past all those dry spreadsheets and corporate strategy documents and instead dive straight into the deeply human reality of corporate relocation. Because, when a multinational company decides to expand across the globe, it's not just moving assets or capital, it is moving people. And the psychology behind how those people process that massive life-altering change, it's absolutely captivating.
So, let me ask you a question. Seriously, think about this. Would you uproot your entire life if your boss asked you to? Just imagine sitting at your desk on a random Tuesday, and management comes up and asks you to pack up your house, pull your kids out of school, leave your friends, and move thousands of miles away to a totally unfamiliar country for a few years. It's a huge request, right? We aren't just talking about some abstract academic HR theory here. We are talking about a profound psychological dilemma. How does a normal person mentally justify completely dismantling their comfortable life just for the sake of their employer's international expansion?
While this brings us to what we can call the expatriate's dilemma. The moment a worker is tapped on the shoulder for an international assignment, they are instantly plunged into this state of high ambiguity and immense risk. Suddenly, the future becomes a giant question mark. Will my family adjust? Is this actually going to help my career, or will I just be forgotten by the folks back at headquarters? Will the new country even be safe? To deal with this sudden rush of uncertainty, humans naturally have to find a way to make the chaotic situation feel logical, ordered, and, most importantly, meaningful.
Okay, let's dive into exactly how we do that, because this is where the core framework of our explainer really comes in. Researchers call this psychological survival mechanism sense-making. Basically, it's a collaborative, ongoing process where people and an organization create a shared awareness and meaning out of totally ambiguous and uncertain situations. And here's the thing, it's not just something you do alone in your head. It's the conversations by the water cooler, the shared stories, the way you and your colleagues collectively figure out what is happening to you, all so you can gain some semblance of psychological control over the chaos of an international move. But, as you might guess, employees aren't creating this meaning in a vacuum. This brings us to the flip side of the coin, sense-giving. Sense-giving is how companies and corporate leaders use language, symbols, and stories to explicitly influence the sense-making of their workforce. The organization desperately wants to craft a dominant narrative. They want to give you the specific lens through which you view this massive life change. They're essentially trying to convince you that moving your family across the globe isn't just a stressful disruption, but a totally logical, incredibly positive step that you should enthusiastically want to take. To see exactly how this complex psychological dance plays out in the real world, we're going to look at a really fascinating qualitative study published in Management Research. The researchers looked at a well-established Portuguese retail company that was right in the early to mid stages of massive internationalization. This is great for us because it gives us a perfect real-world laboratory to observe these concepts of sense-making and sense-giving in action, right as the corporate culture is stretching to accommodate these huge global ambitions.
The researchers conducted an in-depth qualitative study on this Portuguese multinational. And what I love is that they dug right past the official corporate PR to find out what the employees themselves actually thought and felt. Because this company was expanding so rapidly, they had a very pressing need to convince their domestic talent to pack their bags and launch operations in new, often very challenging markets.
To really understand the scale of what we are talking about here, listen to this number, 41. At the time of this data collection, this Portuguese retail company was operating in 41 different countries, with over 40,000 employees. However, they had a relatively small number of actual corporate expats, just a select few sent from headquarters to lead the charge. When a company is operating on this massive global scale, but relying on a super tight-knit group of expats to carry the torch, there is an immense organizational need for effective corporate sense-making. They absolutely, positively have to get the narrative right. So to capture that narrative, the researchers conducted 13 in-depth, incredibly candid interviews. And they didn't just talk to one type of person. They spoke to a mix of current expats living abroad, repatriates who had already completed their assignments and returned home, and newly invited managers who were literally just starting to pack their bags. This gave the researchers raw, human data across the entire life cycle of an international assignment, which is exactly what makes these findings so special. What emerged from all this raw data was a singular, incredibly powerful, overarching narrative that the company and the employees essentially co-created. They framed the expatriate assignment as a call of duty. It wasn't just a job transfer. It was framed as a corporate hero's journey. It was presented as an inevitable extension of their role within a company that was conquering the globe, an assignment reserved only for the absolute best of the best. It's truly fascinating that a standard corporate transfer was elevated into a literal hero's myth. And this sense-making becomes intensely emotional. Take a listen to how one expatriate stationed in Spain described it. They said, "When we have to move to someplace, we move, and it is to suffer and to win." I mean, think about that for a second. We are talking about a retail company expanding its stores, right? But the employee has internalized it as this intense, almost militaristic personal mission. The sheer drama of saying you must suffer and win just to open a new supermarket branch really shows how incredibly potent this corporate framing can be.
So, why does this specific narrative work so well? Well, first, it frames the assignment as a necessary, almost natural step for only the absolute best employees. By heavily flattering the worker, it makes refusing the assignment feel like a total betrayal to the corporate family. This is just brilliant psychological framing, because it essentially guarantees unquestioned acceptance and completely neutralizes any resistance. After all, if the story is that only the best employees answer the call, well, to complain or push back would mean you aren't actually the best, right? But the research revealed a major twist. This sense-making, it isn't static. It changes. The way an employee interprets this call of duty shifts dramatically depending on exactly where they are on their expatriate timeline, before they leave, during their time abroad, and after they finally come back home.
We can see this sense-making build across 3 distinct phases. Before they leave, newly appointed managers are usually highly anxious, but also incredibly grateful, desperate to prove they deserve the honor. Then, during the assignment, that starry-eyed gratitude pretty much vanishes. It's completely replaced by the sheer effort of daily survival, adaptability, and resilience in a foreign environment. But the real shift, the big one, happens in the after phase. Repatriates, the ones who have come home, suddenly view the whole thing as a massive risk to their career reintegration. To them, it was a once-in-a-lifetime duty that is now firmly in the rearview mirror. The tension between the corporate need for expats and the harsh reality of returning home is perfectly captured by one repatriate who noted, "Today, the return of expats is a problem. When they return home, they may not find the structure or an appropriate job." Basically, once the hero returns from the journey, they often find the company has simply moved on without them. The very same assignment that proved they were the best now leaves them feeling completely disconnected from headquarters. This creates a stark, super fascinating contrast in how different employees view the exact same corporate policy. For the newly invited folks, the assignment is this mandatory career opportunity that demands their utmost gratitude. They genuinely feel they owe the company for choosing them. But for the repatriates, the veterans who have already survived the assignment, the sense-making flips completely on its head. To them, it was a high-risk obligation that is now complete, and it demands reciprocity. The veterans feel the company now owes them for their sacrifice. And this shift brings us to the final narrative beat of our explainer today, the price of loyalty. Because what the research shows is that while the Call of Duty narrative works absolutely brilliantly to get someone on an airplane the first time, expatriation ultimately reveals itself to be a highly transactional reality. The crucial point here is that this Call of Duty actually comes with an expiration date. Just listen to what another expatriate said. "I think everyone has to do his share, and I've done mine. Going again to Brazil or Angola? Certainly not." Once an employee has suffered and won, once they have survived the assignment, they have earned the social legitimacy to say no. They have paid their dues. At that point, the dominant corporate narrative simply loses all its power over them. So if we step back and look at the full cycle of this sense-making, it goes like this. First, the company triggers ambiguity by expanding abroad. Second, they immediately use sense-giving to frame the move as a highly prestigious call of duty. Third, the employee eagerly engages, adopting that hero narrative while secretly expecting career rewards later. But finally, upon return, the reality of career risk shatters that initial narrative, meaning any future requests will require deep, highly transactional negotiation. The magic of that first call, it's entirely gone. Which leaves us with this final provocative thought to ponder today. If an international assignment is framed by a company as a call of duty for their most loyal employees, what happens to that corporate culture when the company fails to answer the call upon their return? It is a serious question every expanding multinational needs to consider. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. More information in the paper, Pinto, L.H. and Caldas, A.R., 2015, Making Sense of Expatriation Management, Research the Journal of the Ibero-American Academy of Management, Volume 13, Issue 3, pages 267 to 284. You can find it at http://doi.emeraldinsight.com/DOI/10.1108/MRJIAM-07-2014-0559.